Hi everyone. So in this video, we'll talk about states in React. We'll try to take a closer look upon these states and how are they handled by React, and how does React see these states, and what do we mean by React as a state as a snapshot or a UI as a snapshot. So let's just for example, if we have any kind of state, for example, I have a state such as um number comma set number, and there's some kind of state, for example this. Now this is a state, right? Some people, and sometimes when we are in the initial stages of learning React, we might think that these state variables are just regular JavaScript variables, but on the contrast or on the contradiction, state variables are not regular, are they are like nowhere close to being any kind of regular JavaScript variables to which we can directly read or write. We can only change the state variables with the help of a rewrite. So, for example, like what is a re-render? As we have talked about in the previous videos, re-rendering or maybe rendering is just calling the component, and the component returns us a snapshot of the UI. A snapshot of the UI is basically the updated components. For example, if I had some kind of component and it used this num state over here, right? And I click this button, and on clicking this button, the state of this changed from say 0 to 1. Now this, as soon as I click on this button and as soon as the state is changed, this update is reflected on our screen. How React changes the state and returns a snapshot of the UI with this updated state. And over here, if you can see, React has this updated state, and over here it sees that, oh, it is different, and so it just swaps these, and our UI or the DOM tree is updated. So this is how uh, like states should be perceived by us. So if they are like state variables are not regular JavaScript variables, then what exactly are state variables? How are they stored? How are they accessed? And how are they used to update the UI of our application? See, state variables are not, they are not limited to any kind of function, any kind of component, or a file, or maybe anything wherever the state variable is written. Maybe I could move. So state variables are not limited to any kind of function or a component or any multiple components. State variables lie in React itself. What React it does is React basically maintains a state shell. It maintains a state shell. For example, if I have let's say three kinds of state maybe state variables in my application. So what would React do is React would store them in the state shelf. This state shelf is above and beyond all kinds of functions, components, multiple components, or anything like that. These can uh, uh, like whenever we have to do any update, like for example, if I have three kinds of states, one is like over here, it is storing the value currently as 1. Another has the value 2, and say this has value of 2 maybe. So, and if I click on some kind of button maybe, and on clicking of this button we have to change this state. So what would React do is, on clicking of this, it would execute the on submit function, which would have the code return of set number to number plus 1. So it would update this state shelf to this. As soon as this state shelf is updated, see over here, like from initially it was false, and let me just illustrate. I took this photograph from React documentation. React documentation is a great source to learn React. I have learned React myself from there, and it's amazing. So yeah. So if I have any kind of application and I have a button over here, and on clicking this, some kind of state should be changed. Okay, so this is currently our state shelf which React has. State shelf is above and beyond every kind of function. It lies in the memory of React. So over here, even if I use it over here, over here, and anywhere I use any of these states, we can access them and the value would remain the same because we have a central control over the states, right? So now, as soon as I click on this button, React, queues a render. What would a render do? Render would eventually first React would change the state to true, and then render would call the component again with this updated state, and it would just change the UI uh, uh, by the snapshot of UI which has been created by the updated state, matching all the updated states and props and whatever components that needs to be changed. And like this, React would update the UI and the state shelf and all. Okay, so so this was how states are handled by React, right? So let's just see one kind of example, right? Over here, if we have this, okay, button, this is a button we have. So it looks something like this. And it has, currently it has a value of 0, okay? Now it has some kind of one-click function, okay? Um, this is, uh, okay, so it has some kind of one-click function, right? And on-click function has these three, um, you know, like we have this on-click function has three, what do we say, like commands or maybe something like that to set the number, whatever was its value, previous value, to increment the value of the state variable number, right? Whenever we click on this. Now, as you can see, we have written this updation of state variable or increment of the state variable thing 3 times, right? Okay, so whenever I click on this button, what should be the output? Should the output be 1 or should the output be 3? So this requires us to have an understanding of seeing React state variables as a snapshot, as some fixed items. So basically the output would be this. Now I'll try to explain why output 1 would be the correct answer and not output 3, even though over here we try to increment the state 3 times. So why? Because React sees states as snapshot. Snapshot basically means, for example, if I have this screen right over here and I take a snapshot of this, right? So once I have taken this snapshot, no matter how many times I try to see it, the values inside it must be the same, right? For example, if I have this snapshot, okay, and then I have another snapshot or maybe something like that. Okay, so consider this as a snapshot. Okay, now let's say someone doodles something upon this. Okay, so what do you think? Will I be able to see the doodle on this snapshot also? No. Why? Because this change cannot be shown on this snapshot because snapshots have fixed values inside them, which can be uh, you know shown only if some kind of updation function is run upon them, right? Okay, so So why did not we get this output, and why did we have one output even though we tried to change the state three times? This is because we passed the states as snapshot, which means, see, initially we loaded the screen, right? We loaded the applications. So on the first, when we were on the first render, what was the state? What was the value of the state variable number? So if this was this, so on initial render, the state value was zero, right? Since this was this, and now I clicked on this button, right? So in my state shelf, I remember I told you whenever we have to render anything with the update, whenever a state update triggers a render, React takes the value from the state shelf, right? So simple. Over here, it initially it came over here. What is inside the state shelf? It's zero. So what did it do? Zero plus one. This also came to state shelf. Initially it's zero. Right now it has not been updated. It will be updated only when a render is successfully completed, right? Only then the state shelf would change. So right now, so what does it have? It has a zero, and then it also goes to React shelf and sees, oh, it's a zero. So it just increments like this, and finally, after completing all this, render is maybe completed, and then the state shelf is changed. If I click on this button again, so value would be 2, right? So you do you now understand, like, why seeing states as a snapshot is important to understand the working of React. So maybe you are building some kind of application, and they want you to build some kind of button which increments some kind of variable by 3 times. Okay, so you maybe, if by mistake you write this code, and then it would just give you this answer, and then you would think, oh my god, what is wrong? So you know so this helps us understand what is actually happening inside React. How is React actually accessing the state variables? How is it updating them on each render? What is exactly happening, right? So this is how we see, or React sees states as snapshots. So yeah, so this was about that. Now we'll see, what if we would be doing an asynchronous state update, which means, for example, if we have another button over here, right now it has a value of 0, and in the state shelf also it would have a 0 value, because the initial value was 0, and this is the first time the screen has loaded. So on the initial render, the default value, initial value is 0, right? Now on click uh, of this button, this is the text which would be shown on the button, right? So on click of this button, which tries to increment this number to a plus 5, what would actually happen? So it would do a number plus 5, so 0 plus 5, it would increment the number to a plus 5. But now see, how much time would this increment take? Possibly just a 0.1 second, right? But see, over here, this timeout thing, which is slower. See, over here, see, this increments this number variable, state variable, to plus 5 value, right? So how much time would it take? It would just take maybe, 0.1 or 0.2 seconds maximum, right? But over here, it executes after 3 seconds. So it is kind of asynchronous, right? So after 3 seconds, what would value this thing show us on the alert, on the alert screen, right? So what would it show? Would it show 5, or would it show a 0? So correct answer is 0. Why? Because when the number was passed to this alert thing or the set timeout function, it was 0, right? And states are fixed in React. Once it is passed, it's passed. And then even if I try to change this 10 times before the actual execution of the function, it does not matter, because once 0 is passed, 0 would only be reflected. So states as a snapshot or as a fixed values also work in the case of asynchronous state updates. So output would be 0. So over here, if you would try to read, the state stored in React may have changed by the time of the alert function actually runs, but it was scheduled using a snapshot of the state. So when the scheduling of the timeout function was done, during that time, the snapshot of state contained a 0. So that's why the when the user interacted with, so that's why we would get 0 as a response, right? uh, a variable's values never changes within a render. Whenever something is rendering, it would never change, all right? I told you. Over here also, in the state shell, it was rendering, right? So till the time it has not rendered, its value remained 0, right? It did not, after executing this, it did not immediately change to a 1, right? Because it was still within the render, it was still calling all the functions and the components, right? So a state value variable's value does not change within the render, it changes after the render has successfully completed. Even if the event handler's code is asynchronous, which we just saw right now, 0 was passed. So even if the state variable was changed after some time of the actual execution, um, but still, whatever state was passed initially, only that would be executed. Okay, so we have to this snapshot of the UI. Okay, so this is what we mean by snapshot of the UI. Okay, so yeah, this is about snapshot of the UI. Why did we see all of this? This is important to understand batching in React, which we would cover in the next video. What is batching? Basically, sometimes you might want to, uh, you know, uh, change multiple variables, state variables, but you might not want to trigger too many rewriters, right? Every state variables which needs to be changed would trigger a re-render in the React, right? But we don't want to trigger too many re-renders, right? So how can we achieve that? So to achieve that, we perform batching in React. Batching is an optimization technique which is used in React, and it is really helpful. And yeah, so we'll see about it in the next video.